president who is a liar and is willing to kill Americans. And you can't say it more plainly than that. He's killing Americans with his lies. Thousands and thousands of people died because Donald Trump wanted to lie about the dangers of this disease and how it was spread. Now, he's going to spin this, which is just unbelievable to me, with a straight face, saying to America, well, I didn't want anybody to panic. He's running a campaign based on fear and panic. His entire campaign is about making Americans afraid. People in the suburbs afraid that black people are going to move in. I mean, it is ridiculous how he's based his presidency on hate, fear, and panic. And now he's trying to sell this BS that, oh, well, this was just about keeping America calm. It wasn't. It was about protecting him politically and trying to protect his economy that he saw as his, that was his ticket to re-election. The other thing these tapes show is this man is way too dumb to be president of the United States. I mean, he's just stupid. Who does this? Who does 18 interviews with Bob Woodward within 2 months of the election? Who does that, knowing they're going to come out right before the election? Only the most stupid man in America would do that. He is too dumb to lead the greatest nation on the planet.
Well, another word some would use for what has happened is evil. People have died.
But I want to take a moment to say it's not a time to panic about coronavirus.
Welcome to the pandemic. It's the 10th of September, the year of our Lord 2020, live from the capital of the known world, New York City. A very quiet New York City right after Labor Day. It's shocking how slow the city is, how really abandoned the city is. Also from Washington, D.C., in the war room, we got Jack Maxey and Raheem Kassam. Going to have Dan Floyd join us later. Maura Monahan will be coming in the second hour of the show. You just heard Claire McCaskill, Senator McCaskill, triggered by the revelations in the book by Woodward. And she actually kind of, the tell there is that she knows that Woodward's a hatchet man. And why would you ever talk to him? Because he's going to come out with something and try to kill you. But I think that this is really, I don't want to say it's much ado about nothing, but I actually think it can strengthen the president's hand. And but the White House and the campaign, I think, have to get organized on a response. I just saw a tweet by Mayor Rudy Giuliani, I think kind of lays it out. We'll get into more of that, but a lot to do in the show today. We're going to talk about how they're going to steal the election. There's more and more requests now coming for these mail-in ballots, how they're going to try to steal the election from President Trump starting on the evening of November 3rd. We're going to talk about the new whistleblower coming out of nowhere. So they're teeing up that if Trump's reelected, hey, we're going to start right back in the impeachment process. This is the nullification project. Remember, under no circumstances they want Donald J. Trump to actually have the free reign to be commander-in-chief and president of the United States, that the apparatus, the globalist kind of permanent political class, their allies on Wall Street and corporate America and the media will do anything to destroy this presidency, to destroy the Trump movement, all of it. So we're going to get into this today. I want to thank the John Fredericks Radio Network. I was on John for a half hour this morning. He's down at Liberty University, one of the great institutions of the Trump movement. Down at Liberty today, I gave 30 minutes about what I thought about the Woodward book, but more importantly about everybody putting their shoulder to the wheel. Hashtag War and Pandemic, live stream. We need to hear. It's so glad, and hopefully tomorrow we'll be able to, on our 9/11 special, we're going to give some shout outs to some of our audience that have already told us they're volunteering to be election officials, poll watchers, get out to vote, etc. If you're one of the Bernie bros that listen to us and you haven't made up your mind, or you're leaning to still Biden after being part of the family here, hey, that's fine. It's America. Go volunteer over there. But if you're a Trump person, you need to put your shoulder to the wheel because this is a mobilization election. And don't think this Woodward is the last shoe to drop. There's a lot more to come, I'm sure. But I'm sure President Trump's going to get through this. I think we definitely need a sharper response than yesterday. But I think he already tweeted out, and he's going to go on point today. And I think we're going to expect some real fire back. I want to bring in Raheem Kassam. By the way, America's Voice.News, the guys at Dish Channel 219 out in Colorado. I want to thank them to do such a great job of putting on the show, and particularly the Saturday specials. I know it's a real tough thing to pull it off on Saturdays, but they're fantastic. We got an amazing special this week. Miles Guo has basically done an end run on the Chinese Communist Party. He's flipped the tables on them on the new cultural revolution, yes, using modern culture. Modern culture, which the Chinese people love American culture, they love Western culture as it gets through the firewall. He's turned the tables on the CCP, and they don't know how to handle it. So tomorrow, 9/11 special to commemorate the 19th anniversary of 9/11, and then on Saturday, the new cultural revolution. Raheem, Jack, I know you've got a lot of ideas, a lot of concepts, a lot of opinions about what went down over the last 24 hours. So let's get into it. So let's start with about Bob Woodward. He's going to have the big 60 Minutes interview on Sunday. I think that'll probably be a 2-segment interview to really fire off the football. The book comes out on Tuesday. I'm sure there are going to be more leaks about more salacious information coming out. I'd like to hear your guys' assessment, and particularly the audience. Hashtag War and Pandemic, live stream, all of our different platforms on Facebook, all the people watching the show live. It's a massive global audience. I want to thank G News and GTV for putting it in Mandarin. I want to hear from all of our Chinese colleagues, and also the guys at Newsmax, Chris Reddy and 70 Million Homes. We're so thankful for you guys putting this thing out there. The show gets bigger, more popular, and more controversial every day. So Raheem, give us your take on, are you in full meltdown on the Woodward book, or where do you stand?
I have absolutely no interest in it. I have absolutely no interest in just another news cycle with another book with more ludicrous claims and claims that can easily be battered away as well. We saw what President Trump's former lawyer has been saying about this book this morning, that it shows that at a time when the entire country was on tenterhooks about this Chinese Communist Party virus, that the commander-in-chief remained calm in the face of adversity. And I think that's all that needs to be said off the back of this thing. The only other thing that bugs me is that he's doing these interviews at all. I just don't think the president should be wasting his time with people like this. You saw Bernstein coming out and saying, "Oh, this is worse than Watergate," and it's not, and it's nonsense. And we had the same thing yesterday. Another whistleblower. I read a tweet this morning, and I think it summed it up best. It said, "Can we just get through one term for this president where he doesn't have to fight off a coup?"
Well, Steve, I've got some very strong opinions, and I think it is important. I think it's a great reveal, Steve. You said
the voice of the deplorables, Jack Maxey. I'm shocked that you got a strong opinion of it.
You said it at the start. The big reveal here is that why would anybody be so silly as to trust Bob Woodward and the mechanization behind him, i.e. the Washington Post, the mainstream media? She just pointed it out for all of America to see. The biggest mistake you could make is to trust these people, and by extension, to trust their cohorts, which would be the Democratic Party. If this was so dangerous, and Donald Trump said it in a tweet this morning, why didn't Bob Woodward say something about it 6 months ago so that all of these deaths could have been avoided? Now, what I think is the big buried lead in this, they've got plenty of quotations here, but I think if some of these quotations are true, then some people have to answer to them. They have to tell us whether they're correct or whether they're wrong. And one of them, there are no good answers. Either Bob Woodward is thrown under the wheels or Mattis is thrown under the wheels. I quote, "Mattis quietly went to Washington National Cathedral to pray about his concern for the nation's fate under Trump's command, and according to Woodward, told Coates, quote, there may come a time when we have to take collective action since Trump is too dangerous and he is unfit." To me, that sounds like preparation for a coup, and I would imagine that a sitting head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff would have to answer to that. So I am asking all of you wonderful mainstream media reporters out there to confirm that from General Mattis. And if it is confirmed, I expect that we have a military tribunal post-haste. So, Mr. Mattis, is it true or is it not true? Mr. Coates, the fact that somebody said that to you and you kept it under your hat only to share with Bob Woodward means that you are the worst kind of American. Thank you.
Technically, to be correct, Jim Mattis was Secretary of Defense, not Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. But I want to go to two things. Look, we take great pride in that. We've taken this pandemic seriously. We were the first people to do it back in mid-January of 2020. And that's because Miles Guo and the team at G News and GTV had done such great research of what was happening in mainland China. As we started to do our Lunar New Year annual broadcast to the Chinese people. We took this very seriously, and obviously we know a lot of people at the White House and on the campaign. But I think you go back and argue the facts of the case. The facts of the case, the two controversial moments are talking about in the Woodward book. I think it's around February 7th, Raheem, and then March 16th or 17th. But look what President Trump did. President Trump, obviously did the ban on China, but people don't talk about the second action. He quarantined Americans for the first time, I think, in 50 years when they came back. In addition, that whole month of February, he was getting blowback from the Democrats that he was over getting people too worked up. Remember, Nancy Pelosi's, I think, in Chinatown. Cuomo's dancing around. Blasio saying, "Hey, let's have a block party." All of that. While Fauci last night, and this Politico story is very important. We're going to get up on the site. I know National Pulse is going to be talking about it. But Fauci last night said there's not one thing that the task force recommended or said that President Trump was misleading people about publicly. This is very important. The task force was put together. President Trump worked through all that. Now, the second part of where people's heads are blowing up on Woodward's book, I think comes, guys, around March 16th or 17th. Well, people have to remember, I think that's right after President Trump gave an address to the nation from the Oval Office. He declared that travel from Europe was going to be banned, and he got massive blowback from that. Remember, the World Health Organization people said the one thing you should never do is kind of ban travel, because then people start lying about it. Trump took a bold move. And why did he take a bold move? Remember, it was Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx that went to the Oval Office and put the memo in front of him with a bunch of analysis. I do know also there's a lot of other memos that are being written, a lot of other analysis being done by the White House staff and the task force. And the task force, Vice President Pence had already relieved Azar as the head of it, although Azar was the deputy. He had the top team around. They had Fauci, who brought in Birx from the State Department. Dr. Fauci, who is, at 70% approval, I think, with the American people, and at 99% approval with the mainstream media. You don't see them pushing the Fauci. You don't see them pushing the Fauci story. The president, after the address to the Oval Office, which he announced he was going to make a decision on banning all travel from Europe, he then, the next day, I think, declared a national emergency, which gave resources, unlocked massive resources to the states. And he started focusing on that triage, the federal government to set overall policy and resources, the governors, as according to federalism, to manage it, and the mayors and the county executives to actually be the execution of it. Okay, so I'd like to know in anywhere where he didn't perform actions that were in accordance with a plan that was a kind of a group of buy-in by the smartest people we had, Dr. Fauci, other Dr. Collins over at NIH, the whole staff. So I just don't see where it went when Raheem and Jack. I think this is something they ought to fire back on big time.
You do? I mean, I think fire back on. I'm not sure about big time. Here's the thing. A lot of people underestimate the intelligence of the ordinary voting American. And the ordinary voting American will remember Nancy Pelosi in Chinatown. They will remember Joe Biden saying, "Don't panic," as we said at the beginning there. So it only matters, in my mind, as a campaign talking point if the Democrats had a better response. If there was a diametric difference between the two parties where the left could say, look, they ignored people like Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi, and don't we wish they were running the country? But the fact is, it was the other way around. And so I think that the Trump campaign could actually get quite distracted and bogged down by something like this, when in reality it could be waved off just by repeating those clips of Pelosi, come to Chinatown, party with us. I would move on to something more serious. This coup is not going away. And Ginsburg, who we saw in the Washington Post and CNN and MSNBC yesterday, guess what? We just dropped the story, Steve, on the National Pulse. Jones Day represents Huawei, TikTok, and employs CCP officials. We'll be right back.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
We want to be vigilant about what it might be on what is out there in other places. We want to be careful about how we deal with it, but we do want to say to people, come to Chinatown. Here we are. We're, again, careful, safe, and come join us.
Take the subway, go out, enjoy life,
and certainly not to miss the parade next Sunday. I'm going to be there.
If you had to, would you close down the borders? No. we need to be honest about the American people, with the American people, about the fact that we can't keep people coming here from China.
And transmission is not that easy. I think there's been a misperception that coronavirus hangs in the air waiting to catch you. No, it takes direct person-to-person contact.
We also know that if it were likely to be transmitted casually, we would be seeing a lot more cases.
Right, because this is New York, and you're in elevators and trains with everybody all the time.
Welcome back to War Room Pandemic. It is Thursday, the 10th of September, the year of our Lord 2020. Ooh, fumble my words. The year of our Lord 2020. Jack Maxey, Raheem Kassam here in the War Room. Stephen K. Bannon joining us down the line on the John Fredericks Radio Network, America's Voice, G News and GTV, blown through the CCP's firewall, subtitled in Mandarin later on Newsmax TV. Steve, I couldn't recall if we had done that at the top, so I figured I'd just do it again. That's the supercuts. Nancy Pelosi, and for the radio audience, by the way, who can't see the clips when we roll that, Nancy Pelosi says, oh yeah, we're being safe, we're taking precautions. She's got about 50 people like crowded, huddled around her. There's no masks. There's cameras in her faces. You know, she's right up in the face of somebody else. There's no precautions being taken there. We heard at the beginning of the program Joe Biden talking about, hey, this isn't a need for panic. I want to make sure we have the clip later on in the show as well of Fauci at the beginning saying, yeah, I don't think it's going to really be a problem. And there was one guy in a position of power at the beginning of this year, gentlemen, who actually did take the steps necessary to guard against a wider spread of this virus. And that man was President Donald J. Trump. With the assistance of his great advisors, Peter Navarro, we'll launch this show in January the 23rd. This is why I don't think this narrative is going to cut through, Steve.
But I think they ought to turn it. Look, people are talking about the pandemic as being one of the central things that people are judging President Trump on. I think it's now time for the Trump and the White House and the campaign to turn the tables, use this to their advantage. Look, we're the platinum standard when it comes to shows about the pandemic. We have broken more news. We've given people, as our audience knows, we've talked about the nomenclature, gain of function, every type of detail, every type of statistic. Back in January, in the first week of February, we were months ahead. We called it a pandemic on that 21st or 22nd of January when the mainstream media, what WHO didn't get there until March, mainstream media wasn't there until mid-March or later. Okay, so, and we didn't change the name. When people said, oh, the pandemic's over, the pandemic's not over. Okay, we've been on top of this. And we've actually recommended and advised much harsher measures, more concentrated but harsher. But I got to tell you, that supercut, I want to tell the AVN team and Vish and all the guys, Dan Floyd, is just incredible. But I remember we fought this was back in February, the lost month of February. The reason you have a lost month of February is not Donald J. Trump. He had a task force, and he had a task force that Dr. Fauci had a senior voice in, and Ambassador Colonel, Birx, Dr. Birx was part of too. They were making recommendations. They were moving along, and President Trump didn't want to panic people, as you should not do. The last thing we needed was panic, okay? But they took many direct actions. And the Democrats, the last month of February, you saw it right there. Nancy Pelosi and a big pack of people. De Blasio's on Morning Joe. Where's Morning Joe this morning? Well, how come they're not playing the supercuts of all the guys that came on there in February and mocked and ridiculed this and said it's all racist, it's nativist, it's xenophobic? No, it's not. The Chinese people were the first ones burdened by the CCP virus. And you're going to see a lot. Yesterday afternoon, Dr. Yan, who is going to be a major player in this, right? We never get these things wrong. You watch what she's reporting. Boston Magazine has got some professor up at MIT is trying to take credit for saying that, hey, this thing came from the Wuhan lab. It's actually man-enhanced. It's actually part of some sort of program. Now, she's not going to get credit for breaking that because Dr. Young and the other defectors did. However, we welcome her to the party because now you have a faculty member, I think, up at MIT that's jumping on here. This is all going to explode over the next week, okay? We at War Room Pandemic have been on this from the very beginning. We got more insights. We got more details coming out of China. We've been in touch with the Indian government. We have Dave Ramaswamy. We have people all over the world. Remember, we had all the reporting from Italy. So we know what the facts are. And I think the campaign's got a great story to tell. Tell the story. And you can blow up Joe Biden. Just remember, I want to go back to this. Joe Biden and the Democrats are supposed to be so smart and so tech savvy and so in tune with data and research and science. They always say, trust the science. He went to his convention 2 weeks ago in late August, given everything we know about this pandemic today and looking at a potential second wave, vaccines, therapeutics. It's very complicated. What it's done to the economy. He went to his convention and he gave a speech and talked about the best thing he had was some sort of little memo from March 24th. That's an insult to the American people. That's an insult to the dead, okay? And if the University of Washington is correct and there's going to be another couple of 100,000 of our fellow citizens that are essentially murdered by the Chinese Communist Party, then what he said was an insult to them. You can't go back to March and just pull out something that talks about masks and talks about ventilators and it talks about testing. This is a learning curve. We know so much more today. And what does that show you? It shows you a total lack of respect. That, to get back to Raheem's thing, that people are low information voters. We have total respect for the deplorables. We have total respect for the working class people and the people that support the Democrats. What we try to do all the time is convince Democrats that it's in your advantage to vote for a populist nationalist program. Has Donald Trump's response been perfect? No, it hasn't been perfect. Just like in World War II, it wasn't perfect. Just like in the Civil War, it wasn't perfect. Just like in the American Revolution, it's not perfect. We're humans. We're fallen. The whole concept of the West is that we're not perfect. But if you go back and look at the actions and tie it, contextualize it, particularly what the smartest guys in the room were saying at the time, the Nancy Pelosi's and that supercut of the Democrats. And by the way, that was a supercut, and I really want to appreciate Vish. I think those were New York City and New York State politicians, okay? At some point in time, they're going to be held accountable for all the deaths and all the destruction. I'm here in New York City today, and I'm here to tell you, the reason I wanted to come up after Labor Day was to say, hey, this is a problem. The greatest city on earth is dead in its tracks, okay? And the same clown show that was back in February saying, hey, nothing to worry about, is the same one that's kind of over-panicked now and has this city in lockdown. You have to be smart, you have to be tough, you have to be savvy. And this Woodward Burke, I would turn the guns back on him right now, and I would blow up Joe Biden. Joe Biden's wandering around. You got to make command decisions. Every decision Donald Trump made was perfect? No, it was not perfect. Given the context, those decisions are pretty smart. Remember, we advocated a much harder shutdown, a much limited, we wanted to go full CCP and what they did in Hubei and what they did in Wuhan. People made very, I think, relevant arguments of why that probably wasn't the best course. I still think ours was better, but hey, theirs was pretty good, pretty solid, and had some pretty good results and totally different than what the Democrats are offering at the time. So to me, this Woodward Burke should be turned around and really pounded. So Raheem, I do disagree with you in one thing. I don't think you just say something about this and pass it on. They want to go. The other thing I want to toss back to you guys, Raheem, I'd like to have your thoughts before I jump in. I think Jack Maxey brings up an incredibly important point. Remember, part of what they're trying to do is prep the battlefield for the coup that's going to take place. And look, this is not me, this is not Bannon with his hair on fire. I'm just reading and we're reporting out what the left's saying with the transition integrity project. Remember, they've already got a transition. That means Donald Trump loses, right? So they're already telling you, hey, he's going to lose. Here's how we're going to do it. A huge part of this is where the military comes in, and I can't believe I'm saying that in the United States of America, particularly being a former naval officer, the daughter who went to West Point and served over in Iraq. So it's absolutely disgusting. I want to turn back to you, though, Raheem, first to Jack Maxey's. This whole thing about Coates and Mattis, this has to be drilled down. To me, this is actually more important in the book than what President Trump said about not panicking the American people.
Well, look, Jack, you'll have to excuse me, but I am just so not surprised because at this point in time, they have done literally everything but barring marching the military into 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue to remove the guy. And the cartoons and the things that are coming out now on the front pages of the magazines do represent just that thought process in their head. So perhaps it's just the fact that I'm not surprised by all this. I agree with you that it's disgusting, that it shouldn't be happening. I agree with Steve that I'm sure both of you as veterans of your country's armed forces are disgusted by it. But they are after regime change, and every single tactic in the playbook of regime change that we've seen used everywhere else in the world has been used here. So why not this?
Well, I mean, why not this? Because I want all of the people out there, particularly the former military and current military members, to remember your oath to the Constitution to defend it against all enemies, foreign and domestic. One thing is clear as we've watched this whole pandemic play out. The only person in a leadership role who has put the Constitution first is Donald Trump. That is why he left most of the decisions to the states, places like New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, Rhode Island, where they absolutely failed at every single level. And then you watch Biden 3 or 4 days ago, he comes out and he says, well, if I get elected, we're going to mandate everybody have masks. Till somebody says, oh, Joe, that might not be constitutional. Let's remember which group of people default on the opposite side of your liberties and your rights every single time. It is the Democratic Party. My advice to Donald Trump is to come out, leave Fauci and the rest of them. They're in charge of the vaccines. You're in charge of the country. You're in charge of inspiring the American people to stand up and get on with life. The Democrat plan is to keep this country shut down and in a state of fear all the way through the election. Why? Not because they care about your life, not because they care about your multi-generational family business. They don't care. They want power, and that's it.
Yeah, well, we'll come back. We've got more of this to go through as well. There is just so much new whistleblower, new impeachment attempt coming. I'm telling you, this Brian Murphy character, we got all the gossip on that. We'll be back in just a second.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Well, welcome back.
No cold open there.
Welcome back to Hashtag War Room Pandemic. Raheem Kassam, Jack Maxey here in the War Room, broadcasting live from Capitol Hill in your nation's capital, Washington, D.C., where they will be selling a lot of the Woodward book. Jack, you're right, as we were talking about in the break. But Steve, tell us your thoughts on where this book lands us.
Well, I want to hear from you guys, because you guys are making the case that you're chasing rabbits here. I think they ought to confront this, turn the tables on them, have a adult conversation about the pandemic, where I think Trump wins. And I think he hasn't pressed his case enough on his handling of the pandemic. Okay, I think the American people will support this. I think you close up all these numbers that are so negative on the pandemic. But obviously, you got to pound. We need a China week. We need actions on China, not just rhetoric. We can't talk about and think about decoupling. You got to hammer China. He's going to have to put on the CCP that they originated this virus. They're going to have to be held accountable, and that means for both the deaths and the economic destruction. He ought to be pounding more law and order. He ought to be pounding more jobs. Right? So I think you're right, but I don't think you can avoid this. I know, Raheem, you think by the whistleblower and these other things were playing into their hand, and that's what they want, the distraction. So why don't you walk the audience through what your thinking is?
It is distraction. It's manifestly distraction, and we know it's panic distraction. I talked last week on the John Frederick Show about the panic buttons that the Democrats were hitting post-DNC. They're still smashing those panic buttons. The panic buttons come in several different forms. It comes in the forms of rolling out some of their things that they would have been saving for October, rolling those out early. We're seeing those right now. Whether it's part of this book, and one of the tells that this book was kind of the media narrative was not set up, it was kind of rushed together, was that the New York Times didn't have a review up by the time that Woodward was giving interviews out there in the media. They actually came out like later in the day, and that never happens. New York Times is the gold standard of book reviews, and you make sure they have your review up and ready weeks before you're ready to start doing your media tour. So that's a tell. It's a tell that a lot of this stuff got pushed forward in the grand scheme of where we are in the campaign. The whistleblower that we're now seeing, Brian Murphy, they didn't want Brian Murphy to necessarily come out yesterday of DHS, because Brian Murphy was being attacked by Adam Schiff just last month. He denigrated him as somebody who was not a reliable person. So they were hoping to hold on to this more, let that sink away, let it not be so easily searchable on Google and search engines. But no, they've had to move this one up as well. And I just think when you look at the Transition Integrity Project, when you look at their planning document, that's the playbook. We've heard from Darren Beatty. We've heard about the Revolver.news coverage of the color revolutions. The Transition Integrity Project booklet is the playbook that they're using. And they didn't think we were going to catch on as quickly as we caught on. They didn't think we'd identify who was on the board of this thing. They didn't think we'd identify who they were linked to so quickly. They didn't realize we'd make the CCP Berggruen Institute connection so quickly and slowly but surely dismantling the substance of their arguments. That's why they roll out Ginsburg yesterday. They roll out Ginsburg in the Washington Post and on CNN and on MSNBC yesterday. He looks terrible. He's not ready for it. It's all softball questions. What are they asking him? Is there any evidence of major mail-in ballot fraud? He goes up there, ex-GOP lawyer. He says no, because there haven't been any major uses of mail-in ballots like we're talking about at this election. And so the whole thing doesn't make sense. And then you go back and you look at, who does Ginsburg work for? Oh, he works for Jones Day. And who does Jones Day represent? Oh, it's represented Huawei, it's represented TikTok, and it hires former Communist Party officials. Steve, this is all noise because they are panicking right now. And you know they're panicking because of one of the things we spoke about, you and I, this morning, which is the polling. And what does the polling show us? Let's take the Wisconsin polling, for instance. They say the Wisconsin polling, the media will tell you the Wisconsin polling doesn't show any difference post-riots. It's false. Firstly, there's a 1-point difference, which takes people from outside. It takes the poll from outside the margin of error to inside the margin of error. That's significant statistically. Any electoral psephologist or pollster will tell you a move into the margin of error is significant. But the more significant thing is who is picking up the phone after riots in their home state, violent riots where people are being shot at, and saying, oh, yeah, I'm a Republican, this is where I live. It's not going to happen that way. And so I just think the Democrats are seeing this polling, they're panicking, and we're getting all the noise as a result of it right now.
By the way, the president's listening or watching the show because probably on Newsmax late at night, he tweets out this morning, hey, 80 million ballots, he topped us by 60. So he's probably got better intelligence. But, down Dan Pasquale the other day, or Ed Pasquale in Florida, I got additional reports of Florida. I think there's 2.5 million ballots statewide that have been requested. Only 11 or 12 million people are going to vote. So this is going to be enormous, these mail-in ballots. In California, they're shipping mail-in ballots. I said on John Fredericks this morning, remember, the reason they're shipping the ballots without even request in places like California and potentially New York State, these big blue progressive states, they want to run up the score in the popular vote, don't they, Raheem, to put tremendous pressure when this gets kicked eventually to the House of Representatives, well, it will, where each congressional delegation in the House votes. They want to be able to point that, hey, the popular vote is here. He lost the popular vote. You can't use this racist institution from the racist founders of the country called the Electoral College to really have a vote. So, look, we're going to highlight this every day. I do agree we got a signal and a noise. I just think this type of noise can be turned into signal. Remember, a lot of things that keep pounding Trump on is his poor handling of the pandemic. I'm saying poor handling vis-a-vis what? What was your alternative, right? We've seen these big Democratic governors and these big Democratic mayors. These cities are disasters. These states are disasters. They're going to look for taxpayers throughout the country to bail them out. And they're disasters because of policy decisions. They're disasters. You just saw in that supercut. You've got de Blasio. You've got members of the city council. You had the Speaker of the House of Representatives. These people were, frivolous, I think criminally negligent, given the deaths, and I think there can be some lawsuits. Criminally negligent on some of the decisions, not gross negligence, I think criminal negligence. And so, no, I think the president's but I agree with you, Raheem, that they're nervous, and that's why this is all coming out. I think Molly Hemingway said today on one of the earlier shows, expect another bombshell like this on some different aspect, different report, different leak, every day.
Every day.
This is, and people should understand something too. When Trump wins on the 19th, near midnight on the 19th of January of 2021, so he's inaugurated the next day in a very downplayed inauguration, don't think it's going to get better. The second term is going to be this every day. So if you want to save your country, it's now time to say, hey, no tears, no whining.
Yeah.
This is the way it's got to be. They're going to be relentless. And you've seen, and Raheem, I really want to go just quickly into the whistleblower, because they're teeing up already the next impeachment move. They're not going to have enough time to do it now between now and Election Day, but they're teeing this up in case of the absolute nightmare for them that Trump wins again. We're going to go right back into impeachment mode in the House on the afternoon of January 21st.
Look, this is one statement, one question. This is when the war room is a real war room, right? Where we slightly disagree with each other and we're trying to figure out where the signal is here. And so I was one statement, one question. Later on in the day, we'll be putting together the links between the Transition Integrity Project and the Atlantic Magazine and showing why the Atlantic Magazine had to come in the back of this thing with another panic move, with another false narrative to try and bail out the Democrats thing. But the question I have for you guys, and this pertains to your thing, Steve, about turning this Woodward story around. Look, I've no doubt you could send out a junior talking head to try and turn this thing around. Yeah, I don't think you need to. And here's the thing. My question, is the momentum with the President of the United States right now or not? And I'm interested because I think the answer is yes. And I think what he does is he just goes out there, does more rallies, carries the weight of like the optimism and the country looking forward to reopening and all of the things that are good out there that people are looking forward to and that they associate with him. He just goes out there and keeps talking about that and gets on his heels like he was sort of rocking on his heels during the 2016 campaign, like he was doing in Winston-Salem the other day, and really just lights people up. And my question to you, Steve and Jack, is does the president have the momentum? If you've got the momentum, you don't turn around and start attacking back.
I think the momentum cannot come from rhetoric. I see the stops, and they're fine, but there's still a laundry list. It's going to come from action, action, action. He's still the driver. He's still the protagonist in this drama.
Fine.
He's got
he had 1,000 visas banned yesterday. That's an action.
You know what I'm saying? No, I'm saying action. Action should be yes, but action should be there should be a China week. He should be beating down this. He ought to look at these reports that said it's a man-enhanced, that's going to be coming out in the next couple of days, a man-enhanced virus. He's got to hold the Chinese Communist Party accountable. He starts doing those hard actions. Momentum's definitely going to shift because Joe Biden is low energy, weak, and I think kind of befuddled. You saw the day of the thing on the military. Yeah. So no, but I think where momentum, the type of momentum you're going to have to do, because remember, we're going to have to overshoot the mark here to a degree. We just can't win by a couple of thousand votes in these states anymore. You're going to have to win with big margins, like we did in Florida last time, where they can't steal. You got to run up the score of the Panhandle, so they can't steal it down in Broward, in Palm Beach County, and Miami-Dade, where they've always tried to steal them. Right? You're going to have to run this thing past, and that's where you're going to need real momentum in the run up here. And every day you're going to get chop blocked with this. So I think. First off, I think with Jack Maxey, one of the actions I'd like to take is have the DOJ go after Coates right now. Why didn't Dan Coates come forward? If that was actually said, Dan Coates should have come to the President of the United States. He should have gone to the Attorney General. He should have immediately let the world know about this and held General Mattis accountable. I think you'll find out that Coates it's a lie. Right, that Mattis didn't tell him I went to National Cathedral, light a candle, and that we're going to have to take collective action. I think Dan Coates is lying, but hey, you know, who am I? Let's find out. But I think there's got to be formally some sort of process to find it, because the nation's got to ask the question, Dan Coates, why didn't you took an oath to the Constitution? Why didn't you defend the Constitution against any type of potential, essentially, military coup? Because that's what you're talking about.
I agree with you completely, Steve. And as to Raheem's question about momentum, I believe that the president has momentum on his side. I think that this is like a blitzkrieg, and the Democrats are losing their minds. These little actions like Woodward's book are rear actions. These are guys throwing Molotovs, cocktails at the rear echelon troops doing the mopping up. I think what the president should be talking about every day is not just winning the presidency. I think we need to start talking about winning back the House. We win back the House, we win back America. Every American could just go take a look on the satellite image of America, and you see the burning of Northern California. That's what they want the entire country to look at. You look at California, this place was a paradise in my childhood, and the Democrats destroyed it. That should be all the example that the American people need to see about what's coming if they get control. I think the president should be hammering home, let's win the House. Let's take the whole party down.
Yeah, on the momentum, Raheem, back to the thing. I think you see, look, when you see the Hispanic and Latino polling in Florida, he's definitely got some momentum. Don't get me wrong. I think you have seen the shifting of the tides. Obviously, the polls have closed. But most importantly, the momentum you're going to need to win and hold this. Remember, It's about holding a victory, winning on election night, and then being tough enough to hold it. We're going to get into more of that when we return. Raheem, back to you.
Yeah.
We'll come back to the next block. We'll talk more about the Transition Integrity Project.
No, look, Steve, I get it, and especially I get that nobody should be listening to this and thinking, oh, okay, you know, Raheem says they got momentum, so we can rest on our laurels and be complacent about this. Every single bit of momentum you get, the halt that comes will be even more grinding and screeching if you take your foot off that accelerator. So now is the time to double and triple and quadruple down on your actions, on your rhetoric, on your travel plan, on your assault against the Chinese Communist Party, on your defense of the Constitution of the United States and the Republic writ large. We'll be back in just a moment.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
News for what has happened is evil. People have died because of these lies from the President of the United States.
Welcome back, War and Pandemic. You heard it there from the voice of Mika. He's evil. These actions are evil. It's from his actions as evils come forward. Guys, if Fox or if One America or if Newsmax or one of the great shows on America's Voice, if somebody had said Obama's evil, you know, this guy's evil, his actions are evil, they would be removed immediately. I mean, here's Mika with the most prominent. It's not as big as Fox and Friends or the Today Show, but it's the conventional wisdom of Washington, D.C., watched by all the Washington insiders. Right there, the rhetoric. You see the rhetoric they're teeing up for November 3rd? He's evil. And so if he's evil, it means he can't be redeemed, right? And the American voters can't redeem him. This is all information warfare. Just understand what the game they're running on you. This gets back to the color revolution. And this is not some conspiracy theory wingnut idea. Just look at, we deconstruct this every day, but this is now it's becoming systemic. One of the things about Trump, one of the things about the Woodward book, and that's why I think it has to be confronted, Raheem and Jack, is that this is part of information warfare. Remember, the title of the book is very, very subtle. Rage, right? Rage, right? This guy wrote books about Nixon's administration, Bush, all the war books on the Bush wars, Obama's administration. You never had these titles, rage. Fear was the first one, rage is the second one. And they're trying to show Donald Trump as an evil, out-of-control monster. That's what they're trying to paint him as, a monster. And a monster is evil, and a monster must be destroyed. And the people that support a monster are just as bad as the monsters because they're the enablers. So Raheem and Jack, I want to get into, to talk about the Transition Integrity Project. If we talk about this, I want to get into this aspect of rhetoric and how they're trying to prep the battlefield for their takeover, for really their renunciation of the vote of the American people on the day of the 3 November, the year of our Lord 2020.
Steve, here's something that I don't think anybody's really talked about. Some of these states are going to be required to vote by mail. And in several of these states, and according to the U.S. Postal Service, you're going to require a first-class stamp to send in your ballot. I believe that a very strong argument could be made that first-class stamp is the equivalent of a poll tax. I think you could probably throw a wrench right into this whole thing right now, because there's no difference in my requirement to pay 55 cents to mail in my ballot as there was 100 years ago to pay $1 to be able to vote. So I think there are plenty of problems here, and I think we got to fight back.
I think that's a pretty thin reed to hold your. Hey, maybe it acts on
maybe
it's
a thin reed, but it's still a poll tax. No one is required to pay any money to be able to vote unless it's by a ballot by request. If you're forced to do it, you shouldn't have to pay a dime.
We're going to let Jack run with that one. Jack, go get an election lawyer. Let's get him on here this week. Sure, hey, we ought to look at all these aspects. I think it's a pretty thin reed, but I'm not an election expert. Far from it. So we ought to get some people on here to talk about it. But all these issues are going to come up. Lawsuits are going to be flying everywhere. Remember, the president tweeted out today 80 million vote by mail. We said 60 million, right? With 140, that would be with 100. We had 130 million people voted in 16. I think of maybe 140 million plus here, 40%. The president may be giving you a tell on what he thinks the turnout's going to be by going to 80 million.
Hey, Steve, just to let you know, apparently the ACLU has come out and claimed that requiring postage on these is a poll tax and a potential barrier to low-income voters.
Okay. We should get some lawyers on here to talk about that. I think it's fantastic, right? All these issues are going to come up. All these issues are going to come up, and they're going to come up in the heat of the moment. Remember, Ryan was on yesterday on American Majority, one of the smartest guys around, grassroots guys on the John Fredericks radio show, and he said it's incumbent for all the Trump voters, to the degree that you feel comfortable with your safety, to vote on Election Day. Right, to vote on Election Day, because in the evening of November 3rd, we have to be showing that President Trump's ahead in the count. It's very important. This is what the fifth scenario, remember, they're getting nervous. I think it's back to Raheem's point. The fifth scenario was where he's winning by 424 electoral votes, I think 102 or 101, by 11 o'clock on November 3rd. And in that scenario, they still win, they say, by the 1st of December, right? They still win. So on the count of the 40% of the mail-in ballots. So Raheem, you guys have been doing an amazing job. I know we're going to have Natalie Winters on in the next segment to help us walk through this. Mara Monahan's going to follow that to talk about what's going on in China with the CCP. But I'd like to hear your thoughts, particularly of this rhetoric. The rhetoric you're seeing now in the mainstream media, I think it's pretty scary. Donald Trump's just not about his policies, not about his house style. It's not about the people he's picked to be in these situations. It's now that he's evil. His acts are evil, right? They're denigrating him at a level I think no American president has been denigrated, even Lincoln at the height of maybe the Civil War. Internally into the North, he was obviously he was considered evil by the South, by many people in the South, but hey, that's what they were fighting the Civil War about. So Raheem, I'd like to know your thoughts about this before we go to break.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, it's par for the course. I think they would have denigrated Lincoln to that level if the culture had been at the point the culture is at now. You've got Netflix putting out basically pedophile movies at the moment. You've got the Oscars mandating diversity quotas. You've got people burning down and rioting, looting in the streets to very little recompense, and obviously this big social media thing that we have now that is incredibly toxic. So I think probably Lincoln would have suffered the same fate that President Trump is facing, at least rhetorically, right now, in the eyes of the hyper elites and in the eyes of the Marxists. And my attitude towards this is what you've always taught me, Steve, is just, no whining. This is a fourth turning. We're slap bang in the middle of it. The century opens with an absolute catastrophe upon catastrophe upon catastrophe. We're 20 years into this thing now, and what else do we expect? So my attitude towards this is you suck it up, you stare it down, and you defeat it. And look, I want to raise something that we raised in the break about this this new Washington Post poll very quickly, tease it before we go to break, which they're saying about the mail-in ballots, and most Americans want to vote before Election Day, claims this new Washington Post poll. But then you go through the crosstabs, which I've been going through in this segment here. Turns out most people don't believe or are not very confident that if they do vote in advance, that their vote will actually accurately be counted. We'll bring you the news, the information, the detail from the Washington Post poll that they didn't want to tell you in their copy. We'll be right back with more War Room Pandemic in just a second.